Hey, how's it going? I see a lot of indoor water features on YouTube, and they all have the same thing in common. A beautiful aesthetic covering a hard to reach and hard to maintain electric water pump. So whilst they all look great in those final shots, I'm guessing a fair amount of these serene slices of nature end up dried up and broken down in a couple of years. Well, I wanted to change all that. As regular viewers will know, I'm a big fan of DIY air-driven filters, and it's pretty surprising how far you can make water travel by pumping air at the bottom of an output tube. But would I be able to create a waterfall for a moss-covered aquaterrarium just via an air pump? Well, stay tuned to find out. And if that wasn't enough of a challenge, I also set myself another task. In a very small 25-litre tank, could I maximize the underwater space by creating a cave beneath the waterfall? This might not sound like the toughest challenge ever, but as you'll see, I came very, very close to completely shattering the glass and destroying the whole project. So let's crack on. As you've been seeing, I've been cleaning and scraping one of my old 25-litre hospital tanks to use for this project. It's nothing fancy, but it will do the job, and you'll mostly enjoy this aquaterrarium from above anyhow. First up, let me show you how I'd planned out the filtration and water movement for this project. With the immersed elements to the left and the submersed elements to the right, I wanted to build a loop of piping under the gravel bed on the right and bring the output pipe across the left-hand back corner where my waterfall will start. I achieved all of this with a bunch of 21.5mm pipe, a few elbow joints, and one T-joint, and of course, my trusty pipe cutter which makes these custom filter builds so much easier. For the output pipe and waterfall, I used an old duckbill which fitted the pipe perfectly, but if you're trying to replicate this project, you could of course just use another elbow. Fortunately, I'd used this exact return pipe on an older project, so it was already drilled and ready for the air pipe and air stone to be inserted and nestled at the bottom. This element of the build is completely serviceable at a later date, unlike the rest of the filter, which you'll soon realise will become a very permanent fixture. Perhaps too permanent to complete the build. The final bit of the filter build was to drill holes into the under gravel filter loop. At this stage, sensible people would have tested the filter by filling up the tank. But fueled by optimism from previous DIY filters, I neglected to do this and just crossed my fingers that the next painstaking process wouldn't be in vain. So here we go. I covered the inside of the aquarium with several layers of cling film. I created a mould out of some old dust sheets which would eventually form the cave area on the left. Added a layer of alpha grog at the bottom to ensure the filter holes did not get clogged, and then I started to liberally apply the black scaping foam, courtesy of my friends at Superfish. The scaping foam expands quite a bit, so you have to be mindful of this, and perhaps my first error was creating too dense a section on the back left where the main waterfall and land structure will be. I think perhaps the better way would have been to build up the layers in stages, but ultimately I achieved the look I was going for regardless, but probably with more foam than necessary and a longer curing time, which we'll get to shortly. Before the foam fully set, I began to place serostone into it, leaving space for a small hole to be cut out for access to the cave. I also filled the land mass with alpha grog, which should help with drainage for the mosses and other terrarium plants that we'll be using later. And that was stage 1 complete. The bare bone structure was coming together nicely, and I was really pleased with how the stone sat in the design, giving a natural waterfall feel down the jagged edges of the rock I'd placed in the left corner. All I had to do now was wait a few days for the foam to cure, and then I could lift the whole structure out, remove the cling film, the dust sheet mould, and reinsert it back into the aquarium, ready for the final flourishes. But it wasn't quite that easy. Remember how I made the foam quite dense? And remember how I compacted that already dense foam by pushing rocks into it? And remember how the whole thing is wrapped in cling film, thus reducing airflow? Well, all of this combined, and after 2 days the foam towards the back of the structure was far from cured. It was positively wet and sticky, and I made the situation worse by piercing some of the cling film so that the foam began to stick to the glass of the tank. Basically, I then had to spend several hours gradually slicing the whole structure away from the glass and breaking through into the cave and pulling the dust sheet out small pieces at a time in the hope this might alleviate some pressure. As I gradually pried the foam structure from the glass with a metal ruler, it also started to expand slightly as it reached more air. It really did feel like the aquarium was going to crack at any second, and to be honest, I did consider whether just breaking the glass and buying a new tank might be the answer. But after much perseverance, it slowly became easier, until eventually the structure began to move. Delicately, I lifted it out, and boom, we finally had separation. And as you can see, as I removed the cling film, it was still really tacky and required a few more days of curing out of the tank. But once it was out, it was a lot easier to work on. I was able to shave down the back a bit to ensure it went back in the tank a little better, and I cut away a bit of the foam between the rocks to give it more of a natural feel. And then, after all of that effort, it was time to go back in the tank. Honestly, if I hadn't insisted on having a cave, which required a mould, this would have been a much easier project. Although it is removable if I ever want to use the tank for anything else, I suppose. Just before placing the structure back in, I added a small layer of sand on the left where the cave would be, and then gently placed it back in the tank that it took so long to get out of. It's an odd mark of progress, but progress nonetheless. So, what materials do you need for a successful aquaterrarium? Probably another area I should have done some research on. But pleasingly, what comes next seems to have worked quite well. I added alpha grog on the bottom to aid in beneficial bacteria filtration through the undergravel filter, and I also added more alpha grog to the immerse section to plug any gaps on the edges and to aid in water drainage and increase the surface area for evaporation of excess water, which in turn should improve the humidity of an open-top system. For the substrate layers, I opted for one of my favourite friends of the channel, Carib Sea Eco Complete. Whenever I use Eco Complete in a build, the tank cycles and establishes itself so much faster. This isn't a sponsored segment or anything, but full disclosure, they did send me a free bag a couple of years ago, and I'm using the last of it on this build. Go check it out and comment your thoughts on Carib Sea Eco Complete below, and then maybe they'll sponsor some bigger and better builds in the future. So yeah, I added this substrate above the filter and above the cave to provide a decent planting medium, and then it was time to crack on with the exciting stuff, the plants. First up was a mixture of Christmas moss and other mosses collected locally. On top of that, a variety of sedums such as Angelina and Lydium, some of which fared better than others, and finally some creeping fig cuttings to connect the water and land areas together a bit more cohesively. Underwater, I planted some pearlweed and hydrocotyle verticulata. The pearlweed should eventually carpet if pruned back frequently enough, although it will take a while since I'm not using CO2 or highlighting with this build. With the hydrocotyle, my hope was that this will emerge in the water and provide another area of connection, just like the creeping fig. A final little flourish with some roots, which I should have superglued but will eventually sink, and we were pretty much there. So now, drum roll please, after a painstaking build and a pretty extensive planting session, would the air-powered waterfall actually work? Boom. It did indeed. And I was pretty happy with how it looked already, but a few more weeks of establishing itself and it will look even better. And finally, it was time for the most exciting stuff. Putting some critters inside the new ecosystem. Now, I'd be intrigued to know what others would do in a system like this. Obviously, if it was scaled up 4 or 5-fold, it would be the perfect place for some blind cavefish, and would bring a bit more interest to the underwater cave area. But I just felt this was too small a tank for fish. Let me know what you think. Instead, this will be home to some of my shrimp from the hugely successful breeding paradise of the Shrimple. Additionally, I added a few snails and a whole bunch of springtails to keep on top of the terrarium space by eating dead leaves and keeping everything balanced. And balance is the key word here. I usually experience 1 or 2 hiccups with my experiments, but this one has gone pretty seamlessly. Yes, creating the cave was a nightmare, but establishing both the terrarium and aquarium elements of this build has been a breeze, with no algae blooms or issues with water quality. I find it so relaxing to hear the trickle of the waterfall, and hunting out the springtails or seeing the shrimp chomping on some dead leaves is an absolute delight. What do you think to this setup? Let me know in the comments section below. Oh, and also, 90% of you guys aren't subscribed right now. I'd really appreciate it if you could smash that button and help me grow the channel and make more videos just like this one. So, can you build an aquaterrarium waterfall with an air-driven filter system? Yes, you can indeed, 100% guaranteed. But, can you build an air-driven filter which is a hybrid of an undergravel and a sponge filter? Well, click the top video to find out, or to see what YouTube thinks you'll want to watch next, click the bottom video. Take care, and I'll see you soon.